Hi everybody, and welcome back to Sew Along with Jan and the July Kimberbell Mini Quilt. So this is part 3, and this is going to be the assembling of the mini quilt. I have my parts here that we're going to be using for the assembly. I make a little sleeve to put on the back, and this sleeve is cut out 6 inches wide and 12 inches long. And then what I do, and I left this unsewn so you could see it, I mark 1/2 inch from the corner on the same side. So, and then I trim off at an angle from that 1/2 inch mark down to the corner on the other side. So in other words, one side is going to end up being 11 inches and the other one 12, so that there's a little bit of a contour there. And then I fold it in 1/2 inch twice to make a hem. So when we put this little sleeve on the back, it's going to be hemmed on the ends like this, and then we're going to turn it in like this. Okay, it's going to be folded up and pressed at the bottom here. And then the skinnier end is going to be underneath. So, and then when you bevel it, and make it a little shorter on the one side, then the hems lay flatter and they don't have a big bulky spot right there. So that's one piece you'll need, is your little sleeve, and we'll go over the sleeve again when we get to the part of putting it together. And then you need your backing. That's 14 by 14, and I use the blue, and then I put shape flex on the back of my backing. And the reason I do that is that when I go to stitch in the ditch between the blocks, then my backing doesn't pucker. So I really found that the shape flex works very well for that. So there's my backing. I've got my binding. Now the binding, I've already made my binding, and of course, I sewed it together at an angle. All my pieces, I think it said to cut 3 pieces. I do cut my binding at 2 1/4 inches instead of 2 1/2. You can do either one, whatever works best for you. I like 2 1/4 inch binding, and we're going to put the binding on with the sewing machine. So we're going to be applying the binding to the back and then flipping it to the front and zigzagging it down to the front. Okay, so there's my binding. And then you'll need a piece of, this is for the little sleeve. This is what's going to hold it down at the bottom. So like when we fold this over like this, we're going to put a piece of Heat and Bond Ultra right here just to bond that sleeve down to the backing. Okay, so you need it to be about 11 or 12 inches by 3/4 of an inch. We'll cut it off to the exact size, but you do want the Heat and Bond Ultra bond, which is the permanent bond, and it's not sewable, but we're just going to be adhering the bottom of the sleeve down. All right, so you need that. And then of course we need our four blocks that we made in the last 2 videos. So here's our little blocks. We're going to put these together today. So here's our blocks. And let's see, I'm going to look at the book here. It says to put the rocket and the heart together. So these two are going to go together like this, and then the popsicles and the watermelons are going to go together. Okay, so let's get started on our little mini quilt here. So we're going to put these together first. So this is going to go like this. I like to use the piecing stitch on my machine, and if you like a piecing foot, that's absolutely fine. We're going to be using a 1/4 inch seam, but I like the piecing stitch, which is on the Q tab of most of the machines that have the screens like this. So a lot of you probably have that screen. And there's an actual stitch that's piecing. It's Q02. And what it does is it moves the needle slightly to the right so that I can run my fabric. Go back here again so you can see. I've got my J foot on, and I can run my fabric right along the right-hand side of my foot. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. Let me grab a pin here. We're going to go ahead and put these right sides together. Just going to put a couple pins in so that they don't slide on me. Let's see here. These are pretty good sized blocks, so I kind of thought it was cool that we only had 4 blocks this time. Some of the blocks have been pretty intense. They've had a lot of stitches in them, so these were fun. So they were a little easier. All right, so we're going to do our 1/4 inch seam then. I like to drop my needle into the machine or into the fabric before I start sewing, and I'm going to use the polka dot button, which is a tie-off button. So I'm using this one here. Mine doesn't look like a polka dot anymore. I've worn it off, haven't I? But I like to use that to tie off instead of using the tacking stitch. Back tack, I should say. All right, and then we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam. Keep everything even. I like the way they do their blocks because then you don't have to worry about like a basting line or anything showing, because the basting line is way out here. So that's really nice. Okay, so there's these two. So we're just going to sew those two together. That looks awesome. So then let's do the second two. The second two, because we're going to have to press in between. So the second two go like this. So the popsicles are on the left. All right, so we're going to do these two. Then I'll get up and press these, and then we'll put the 4 together. This one's going to be a nice, easy one. I actually really like doing these little quilts. They just turn out so cute, and I put them in my little frame. It's nice to have something to put up every month that's new. All right, a second here. Again, we're going to drop the needle into the fabric. I just use the needle down button on the front, and then I tied it off, and now I'm going to go forward with my piecing stitch. Just a second here and get this out of the way. I do have cotton thread. I have Pima cotton thread in my needle and bobbin, and it's just white. I'm going to use white, and then for the binding we'll use some monofilament. All right, hope I put these right side up. There we go. So there's the bottom two. That's the bottom row. So then what we're going to do, I'm going to go press these seams, and I like to press the seams open because they're a little bulky because they have some stabilizer on. And then we're going to sew the two halves together like that, and it's going to look like that. So I will be right back after I do some pressing. Okay, so I've got my seams pressed open. Now just a reminder that we do have vinyl on this and some embroidery leather. So just be careful with the iron. You will be ironing from the back, so you'll be okay. But if you do need to iron from the front a little bit or press from the front, make sure you put a pressing cloth over this vinyl because it will melt. Ask Jan how she knows, because I've melted several blocks. I even had one in a quilt once, and I melted it when I was finishing the quilt, and I had to take the whole quilt apart and do a block over. I was like, oh no. So yeah, it happens to everyone. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and put these two rows together. We're going to try to get that seam all nice and lined up in the middle here. Whoops, there goes my scissors again. I spend most of my life picking my scissors up off the floor. All right, so I like to match up my seam in the center first to make sure it's nice and matched. And then I'm going to pin on both sides of it to keep it from one of those little pieces from turning over on me. Okay, and then we'll put a couple pins up here too. And again, our 1/4 inch seam, we're just going to sew these together. This is a fun, simple one. The next one is really cute too. It is, I believe it's a beach theme. If I looked at the August one, I think it's a beach theme. It looked really cute. Had a swimsuit on it and maybe a beach bag. It was really cute. Okay, so now we're going to go and we're going to tie off again. Whoops, I think I unthreaded my needle though. Just a minute. Yep, I did. Rethread my needle here. This Pima cotton thread does unthread some, but because it's very soft and it's kind of thin, so it does unthread, so I have to be careful. All right, let's try that again. Drop the needle in here with my needle down button. I'm going to take a stitch forward and tie off, and then we're going to stitch down the seam. Get everything lined up here. I do have my pivot feature on. I don't know if you can see my foot going up, so when I stop, my foot comes up. really like the pivot feature when I'm working with stuff like this. So I basically leave it on all the time now because it's easier to adjust. When I stop, then I can adjust and my foot goes up, so I don't have to manually raise my foot. Okay, so we're going to make sure everything's okay here. I like to leave those in. I'm going to be very, very, very careful going over these pins. And these are the magic pins. They're very, very thin pins, and they're very soft, so they won't damage your machine if you hit one. So like when I do seams like that, I like to leave them in because then my seam doesn't shift on me. But I am very careful. I go over them slowly. But I've never found another pin that I can do that with. These are so, so soft. All right, so I've tied off again. And let's see how we did. Hopefully I got my seam nice in the center. Ooh, that looks good. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go over and press this one open, and then we're going to be ready to do the stitching in the ditch. I'm going to pin it. I'm going to show you how to pin baste, and then we're going to put this together. All right, so there I've got it all pressed, and again, I'm going to remind you to be careful around your vinyl and your leather with the iron. So I mostly was ironing from the back, so it was not a problem. But if you have to get along these seams or something from the front, put something over this so you won't melt your vinyl. And there's my seams all nice and pressed out. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get this on the backing. So the backing, I always pin baste, and if you want to spray, that's fine, but I'm a pin baster. So I'm going to lay my backing with the shape flex, up, so the pretty sides onto the back, and I'm going to put my little mini quilt in the middle here, and I normally will do this on my cutting table, so I'm just going to show you. I'm going to get started here so you can see, and I'm just going to kind of, center it the best I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. We got plenty of extra room around the outside edge. Okay, and then what I like to do is with the basting, I have safety pins that I pin baste with, and I'm just going to then kind of start in the center, trying to make sure I got it fairly straight. If your backing is kind of printed, make sure you get it, as straight as possible. Some of the prints will, you'll notice them if they're not straight. So, okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and kind of start in the center here, and I'm just going to put pins in each block. So, and what I try to do is keep the pins away from the seams so that when I go to stitch in the ditch, I don't have to move the pins. So move them in just a little bit, so that you won't have to take it out. And don't try not to go into any of your embroidery, especially this vinyl, because the pin or the hole would show. So, all right, so I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to go over and I'm going to pin all the way out to the outside edge. Okay, so I'm just going to pin out from the inside and work my way out. Probably put 2 or 3 more in each block to hold it down nice and flat. And then we'll come back in a moment. I'm just going to take this over to my table to do that because it's a little easier than on here on the machine here. And then I'll come back and we will go ahead and do our stitching in the ditch. And then we'll go around the outside edge to hold it down on the edges. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got my little quilt all pin basted with my safety pins, and we're just going to do the stitching in the ditch down. There's only 4 on this one, so we don't have to do too much stitching in the ditch, and then we'll stitch around the outside edge. I have put in my Mettler Transfill monofilament thread to do this because I find that the monofilament doesn't show when you're doing the stitching in the ditch. So I will have this linked in the video description below. And that way you can order it. I've got it on the shieldsewingcenter.com website. This is great thread. And I looked and looked until I found a monofilament that works really well. And this one, you can use it in the bobbin easily as well. So we're just going to start out here at the outside edge. I'm going to take a stitch in, and we're going to go right down this little seam line. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking, there's a little notch in the middle of my J foot. I've just got my J foot on. There's a little notch there, and I'm just going to run it right along this ditch, and that helps me keep everything straight. If working with a stitch in the ditch foot works better for you, go ahead. I've always just used this foot because I focus on that notch. So I'm also, oh, you know what? I need to make my stitch a little longer. It's normally at about 2.5 millimeters, but we're going to make it 3 because there's quite a little bit of bulk in here and it'll be a little easier to go through. So, all right, so we're just going to go right down this little line. And we don't have to worry about where we start because there's just 2 middle lines, right, this time? So we're just going to stitch right down. It didn't matter which, you could do the horizontal or the vertical one. This is, I guess this is the vertical one. I'm just going down and see, I moved my pins out far enough so that I didn't have to worry about hitting them. So be very careful of those pins. Now those will hurt your machine, so be very careful with safety pins. All right, so we're just going right down that little ditch. I'm going to go down to the edge here. And I'm going to tie off at the end. All right. And cut off, and then we're going to do the other side. All right, so we'll do this side here. So I'm just going to flip it over, and we're going to do the same thing. Go right in here. Take a stitch in and tie off. My needle is in the center. But this has always been the way I've stitched in the ditch. It depends on what works better for you. They do have a really cool foot, Brother does and Baby Lock does, that has a little tine in the middle that helps you stay in the ditch. I find that I do just as well this way, so whichever works better for you. All right, so we're getting just about to the other side, and then we're going to go around the outside edge to hold everything together. But this monofilament is awesome, and I looked and looked until I found a really good monofilament, and it does work really well in the machines, but you do need to wind the bobbin slowly. So turn your bobbin winders down so that it doesn't wind so fast, and then also only wind about 1/4 of a bobbin at a time because they kind of sply the so there, see? There's our 2 lines. And what's nice about with the shape flex on the back of the fabric here, it just keeps everything from looking puckery on the back. I think it looks nice and smooth then. Okay, so there's our stitching in the ditch. We've already got that done. So now we're going to stitch around the outside edges to hold everything together here. And I'm again going to use the marks on my J foot to help me. I'm going to leave my needle in the center, and there's another mark just to the right, just inside the zigzag line. And if I put that mark on the edge of the fabric, this will give me approximately, excuse me, 1/8 of an inch seam then. So it's basically a top stitch. And that's what we want to do our outline around the outside edge so that it won't show in our binding seam. So I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch. So I've got the little notch that's on the outside part, right inside the hole, okay, on the edge of the fabric. And we're just going to drive around the outside edge. And that will hold everything down to our fabric so that it'll make it easier to put the binding on. Things won't be flipping around on us. Careful of the pins. Get down to this corner. We'll turn around the corner. Oops, looks like I might have taken a stitch too many. There we go. Oh, that looks pretty good. All right, so we'll go around this corner. This really helps make it easier to get the binding on. I was always struggling if I didn't do this because then the binding would, sometimes I would miss one side of the the quilt or the backing, one or the other, because it would flip over or something on me. Okay, so then we're going to get this one. Watch this pin here so I don't hit it. Just doing about 1/8 of an inch. This is how I always do top stitching too. I know there's lots of really cool specialty feet, but I kind of learned how to do things the old way, and you use the feet you had. And years ago there just weren't any feet, for the machines. They just hardly had any. A zipper foot, they had a zipper foot basically, and that's about it. And So I learned to do a lot of things with my standard foot, and so I still do. But that's, you can use the specialty feet as well. I use specialty feet for some things. All right, so we're just about around to the other corner. All right. There we go. We're going to cut off and we're around the corner. So now the next step is I'm going to take this over to my cutting table, and I'm going to trim along the edge of the quilt so that I trim off my backing, and then I'll take out all the pins and we'll be ready to put on the binding. Okay, so there's our little mini quilt all trimmed. It's amazing when you trim off the edge how neat it looks. So now we're going to put that pretty little binding on. My binding is white with little blue polka dots. So I thought that was kind of cute. I didn't have the binding that they used in the book. It was kind of a little, almost looked like fireworks, but I didn't have that binding. I think it's one of the newer Kimberbell fabric. So I didn't have that, but I did have the little polka dots. So I thought that'd be cute. And in the meantime, also, I went ahead and finished up my little sleeve here. So I finished hemming. I turned these over on after I trimmed the one side down, a half an inch on each side to make it 11 on this side and 12 on this side. Then I turned it in a half an inch and a half an inch, and then I just went ahead and did a little hem here. And then I folded it in half. So, and then on the shorter side, you can see the side's the shorter side, I put my piece of Heat and Bond Ultra, and I did cut it off a little bit. And what I learned is that it doesn't like to stick too well through this bulk. So I just put the Heat and Bond to the hem lines, and then I'm going to put a little stitch in each corner on the back of the quilt with a needle and thread just to hold those corners down. That seemed to work better than, because this doesn't like to, it doesn't heat up enough through the bulk right here. So I've got my Heat and Bond Ultra on there, and it ended up being, I don't know, 10 or so inches long. So that's what that is there. Okay, so we got this all ready because we'll be putting this on in a minute. Okay, and I've got my binding. I've also switched back to my regular Pima cotton thread. I like to put binding on with cotton thread, and then we will actually stitch it down with the monofilament again. So I just left my monofilament up here. So we'll switch back here in a minute. So when we do binding, it depends on how you want to do your binding. If you want to hand stitch your binding down, then you're going to put your binding on the front of the quilt. If you want to sew it down with the sewing machine, then you will put it on the back, flip it to the front, and sew it down. So that's the way I'm going to be doing mine. But we do need to put our little sleeve on first. So I'm going to go ahead and just fold my sleeve in half here and put a little, oh, I might be able to mark it enough so I can see it. Get my pins out. And the shorter side will go down against the quilt. So I'm going to turn this over like this. And the raw edges are going to be at the top. So this one's easy. It's got a, oops, I got a long string here. Get my long string, oh, there it goes. This one's got a center seam where we stitch in the ditch. So this one's really easy. I'm just going to take my little, I can't say it. I can't say it. Isn't that weird? Sometimes you just can't say a word. Sleeve. There we go. Sleeve. And I'm going to mark it. I'm going to match it up with the center stitch in the ditch line. And I'm just going to pin this on at the top. Make sure I got the top. It's always bad. I've put them on the bottom before. That's bad. You don't want to hang your little mini quilt upside down. All right, so we're just going to put the pins in here. Like that to hold it on. So this is the top on the back, and then here's the top of the quilt. So we got our little sleeve on there. And I am not going to iron this down yet. I will do that later. I like to leave it unironed until I am done with the stitching, just in case it is a little tight. So I am going to put a couple of pins in these corners just to keep it from flopping around on the back for me while I'm working on the bindings. So, all right, so we'll do this. Put a couple pins down there just to hold it in place. All right, so now we're ready for the binding. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start at the bottom. Get my binding here. And I'm going to leave a tail, 8 or 9 inches long. And we're just going to kind of run it along the edge here, put the raw edges together. I've got it all folded in half already. This is 2 1/4 inch binding. And then we're going to go back to Q02, so we need our 1/4 inch seam, and I've got my Pima cotton white thread in here again. I am going to sew this binding on the back of the quilt. Okay, so let's see here. I want to go up to about, whoops, it slid on me. Up here, and then I want to go down to about the corner to get started here. So we're going to start, and I learned to put binding on with a little thing called Bind Aid, and I also will have that linked on the in the description below this video, and it really is helpful because it has good pictures. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stitch up to the corner. You can mark 1/4 inch exactly right here if you want. I just kind of eyeball it by putting my finger where the edge of the little quilt is, and I'm going to stop about 1/4 inch from the edge. And if it's not perfect, it's fine. Okay. And I used to mark everything, but it took me so long to mark it, and I do a lot of binding. So I've kind of gotten so I can eyeball it. And then I'm going to turn it so that I'm ready to go down the other side. And I'm going to take my binding up at a 45-degree angle, keep it even with my corner here, like this. And then I'm going to come straight down, matching up the top corner and the raw edges, and that's how you make your beautiful corners. And then we're going to start at the top here, drop my needle, take a stitch in and tie off, and then we're going to continue down the second side. And again, I'm doing this on the back because I'm going to sew this down with the sewing machine instead of by hand. If you were doing this by hand, if you like to sew your bindings down by hand, put it on the front and flip it to the back. Just depends on how you like to do your bindings. I do so many, I like to do them with the machine. I can get through them a little faster. I even do the big quilts this way now. I used to do all the big quilts by hand, but I've actually started doing all of them with the sewing machine just because I can get them done. Seems like I do a lot of binding. All right, so we're going to tie off. I stopped 1/4 inch from the edge. I'm going to cut. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to flip this around. I'm going to pull my binding up at a 45-degree angle, line it up with my little corner here, like that, and then I'm going to line it up at the top and put the raw edges together again, like that. And now this is the side that we are going to have the little sleeve. I did remember the word this time. This is a Sunday morning, and it's fairly early yet on Sunday morning, so I'm not very awake yet. I'm sorry. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go down this side. Now we're going through that sleeve, so just, be aware that you'll be going through a little heavier fabric right now. I'm going to go across here. I might have way too much binding. I was using scraps for my binding, so I don't really know exactly how much I have. I think I actually have too much. All right. Sorry, my phone rang, so I turned it off. All right, we're just about to this next pin here. Let me get this ready, and then here's our corner. So we're going to stop a 1/4 inch from the corner. And again, if you want to mark it, go ahead. I can kind of tell about where my 1/4 inch is. I think I need to take one more stitch. I'm pretty close. There we go. And we'll tie it off, and then I'm going to cut. I'm going to go around the corner. Get some of these extra pins out of here. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to flip this up, make a nice 45-degree angle, and match up my corner here. Nice and straight, and then I'm going to match up the top and bring it down, and the raw edges should all meet up. It looks good. Start down this side. These little quilts go really quick because they've got short sides, so. I've done I've done a couple of large quilts lately, and boy, they do take a while to get the binding on and to, you know, stitch it down. All right, getting close here. And then I'll show you how to do the little flip at the end. That's the part that a lot of people struggle with, is that little flip at the end. But this little bind aid document, my friend Joni gave that to me years ago, and it's probably, oh golly, getting close to 20 years ago she gave me this, because I'd never done binding before. And it was so helpful, and it's just a piece of paper that with some pictures on it, basically. So I will definitely link it in the video below, so in the description. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. I stopped 1/4 of an inch. We're going to flip this over, line up, and make a nice 45-degree angle with my corner here. Then I'm going to line up the top and the raw edges like that. All right, and then we're going to do part of the side. Now we're not going to go all the way across because we need to have a little bit to work with, a little wiggle room here. So I'm just going to go in just a little ways and leave a bigger opening so I can, okay, like that, so that I have a little room to work with the ends so that they're not so close together. All right. So then we're ready to do the little flip. So this is the part that a lot of people struggle with. So this is how I learned to do it. So this is the part that we just ended with, and I lay it down against the back of the quilt. Sorry, I wiggled the camera. And then I'm going to fold it down like this. Okay. And I'm going to take the part that we started with, which is right here, over this direction. Now I noticed this one's a little long, so I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this off maybe an inch or so, just because it's kind of long. Could have been a little shorter. So we're just going to fold it over and cut this one off just a little so that the seam is a little bit more centered here. Okay, do that. Then let's see here. Of course, I always get a seam right where I have to have another seam, but you know, it's just the way it is. You probably won't even see it. Okay, so now I've got those lined up. So this is the place where this is the end we started with, and this is the end we ended with. Okay, and I've just got it folded down here. So then this is 2 1/4 inch binding, and if you have 2 1/2 inch binding, it would be a different measurement. So I want these to overlap 2 1/4 inches, since I'm using 2 1/4 inch binding. And if you're using 2 1/2 inch binding, you would want them to overlap 2 1/2 inches. Okay, so whatever size binding you're using. So I've got my 2 1/4 inch mark there, and I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to put the pin in the back piece of binding at the 2 1/4 inch mark, like that. Okay, so let's make sure that we got the measurement right. So I always double check, you know, it's always better to measure twice, you know. All right, so it looks pretty good. And then I'm going to cut that off. So then I'm going to fold this back where that pin is, and I'm just going to cut this up like that. Cut it off. Try to cut it off as straight as you can. All right, so there's our, this is the end we ended with, and this is the end we started with. Okay, so then they're like that. So then I'm going to take my, I'm going to take this side, which is the left-hand side, and I'm going to turn it down at a 45-degree angle like this. Okay, just turn it down like that. And then I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to open it up and lay the flat or the back side against the quilt like this. Okay, like that. Then I'm going to take this piece over here. I'm going to try to make sure it's in the camera so you can see it well. I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to continue in the same direction. I'm going to open this now. See, I've got it, my thumb inside of it. I've got my 45-degree angle, and I'm going to continue on in the same direction and open it up. Your folds should be going opposite of each other. So this one's going this way, and this one's going to be going the opposite way. So see how they're going to be perpendicular to each other. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line the corners up here and grab some pins. Sorry, I have to stick my hand in the camera. Get some pins here. I'm going to put 3 pins in here to hold this together. This is a little stiff. You'll have a little bit of problems because of the stiffness of the quilt, and it's just because it has that all that batting and everything in it, and some shape flex and all that jazz. All right, so there I've got that going. So I've got it all pinned, and then I'm going to take a marking pen. I'm going to find my corner over here since I can't see it. I've got all the edges even. I'm going to take my marking pen and I'm going to mark where that corner is here. This one I can see, but I like to mark them both. And you can mark all the way across if you want. You know, you can mark all the way across with a ruler if you want to. I normally can eyeball it fairly well, so I'm just going to eyeball it. And then we need to kind of fold the quilt in half like this to get so we can get this to lay down. That's why you want, you know, your pieces to be relatively long, so you've got some wiggle room here. And this goes for any quilt. When they're small and a little stiff like this, you need to have enough room to get it to flatten out for you. Okay, and I'm going to move my needle to the center needle position. So on my machine it's Q01, and I'm going to line up my little mark with the center hash in my J-foot, drop my foot, or drop my needle, take a couple stitches here, and I'm going to get this all lined up and straight, and I'm going to aim to the other side here. See how we did. It's pretty good. All right. And again, you can make a mark there if you want. I've gotten pretty good. It's not that far, so usually you can eyeball it fairly well. Okay, so let's take these pins out. Trim off the excess in here. And if you're worried about trimming before you check, by all means do this first and then trim. Now I wasn't worried because I knew that it was right, but if you're worried about it, just turn it without cutting first, and then make sure that it lays flat. And it does. So then we're going to go ahead and take this little seam then, if I can get a hold of it, and we're going to lay this, I'm just going to finger press this flat in here so it won't be bulky. Like that. So see, I did have a little seam right there in my binding, but it actually probably won't even show once we get it all done. It's amazing how they just kind of disappear into the quilt. So it's actually going to be on the inside anyway, so who's going to know, huh? It's going to be on the inside. All right, so then I'm going to pin this down. I like to pin this last little bit down so that I know it's flat. Helps me out. Get a couple more pins here. And then we will stitch this down. And then we will be ready to put the binding on the front. This is always fun to get these little guys done. They're so cute. All right. So then I'm going to switch back to Q02 for my 1/4 inch piecing stitch. And then I'm going to start, you know, I started up here where I had ended, so we're going to start up there. Drop my needle and tie off. And then we're going to do our 1/4 inch seam for the rest of this. Get this lined up here. I'm a little off. Right there. There we go. And we'll soon be ready to do the next step, which is sewing it on the front. That's always my favorite part, except I have to go get my glasses. I can't see, especially the monofilament. We're going to use monofilament. It's hard when you have like multiple color bindings sometimes because I don't always have the right color of thread. And like this one has blue and white in it. And so, you know, the white's going to show on the blue and the blue's going to show on the white. So I'm going to use monofilament. Okay, so we've got our binding on the back. Look at there. And see this little part here where that has that little seam? See, that's going to be inside and you won't even see it like that. All right, so the next step then is going to be to press this with a very crisp press on the back. Now again, be aware you have vinyls and stuff on the front, so you want to press this out from the back so that there's a very crisp seam here, okay, all the way around. Make sure you get into your corners. And then we are going to start putting it on the front. So I'll be back in a few moments. Okay, so we're ready to put our binding on. I've got it all nicely pressed on the back. I have a nice crisp seam here. And then the next thing we need to do then is make our beautiful corners on the front. So to do that, second, I've got a string here. To do that, you're going to, I just used 8 little clover clips to hold my corners down. I do this even on big quilts. So I'm going to take the clip and I'm going to put them about, a couple of inches from the corner, 2 or 3 inches from the corner. All right. So I'm going to take one on each side, and I'm just going to bring my binding down to my seam line that I sewed my binding on with from the back, right to that line, and I'm going to put a clip there, and I'm going to turn it over and put a clip here on this side. See if I can tuck the little tails in there, like that. Then we need to make our beautiful corners. So I'm going to get my pin ready. We'll need a pin. And I'm going to run that binding on the right-hand side here up along that line where I sewed it on, and then I'm going to stick my thumbnail up into the corner and make a 45-degree angle right here. Okay. Then I'm going to pull this side down to the line that we sewed it to, and I'm going to meet them up in the corner like that. So it meets up in the corner, and then I'm going to take that pin and I'm going to secure that corner. I'm going to go right into that little corner there that it made, and I'm going to go out the top like that. And that you're going to do all the way around and make those beautiful corners, okay, on the front like that. And I've got all of mine done. I did a few of them off camera, so you wouldn't have to sit here and watch me. But that is how I make my corners, okay? And I get them all pinned, and we're going to leave those pins in there while we're sewing so that they stay beautiful. I've also switched back to my monofilament thread in my needle and my bobbin, and we're going to switch over to a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to go back to my standard tab number 1 here on my luminaire, and I'm going to go to 1-10. I have this one programmed for my, if I can get my finger to work, there we go, for my binding, and I use a special setting. I use the width of 2 millimeters, so it's very narrow, and I use the length of 1.4 to do my zigzagging, okay? So when I do this, I'm going to be using that little notch in the center of my J-foot again, and we're going to bring our binding right up to the line that we sewed it on with, okay? Right, the very edge, the folded edge of our binding is going to come up here, and I'm going to lay that little notch right down on that edge. I'm going to drop my needle. I'm going to tie off. Okay, and I will warn, just to let you know, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, but the monofilament does not always thread with your needle threader. Just be aware of that. It's okay. It's just because it's kind of stiff. So I'm going to hold my binding right up to that line where I sewed it on, and when I'm zigzagging, the right hand zig is going to be on the binding and the left hand zag is going to be off. So I'm just going to keep that little notch right on the edge of my binding. That's in my foot, okay? And I'm going to hold my binding up there, and the right hand zig is on the binding and the left hand zag is off the binding. Just a second here. I'm hitting my embroidery unit. I don't usually take my embroidery unit off when I sew. All right, so I'm going to leave that on. I think I'll take that clip off. Sometimes it's easier for me to hold my binding down. Okay, so I'm getting it all lined up again, and I'm zigzagging down towards the corner, and I'll show you how to do the corners. But the trick is to get a very crisp seam on the back, and to put all of the zigzagging is actually basically on the binding. So it's going to hit the binding in the back and it's going to look nice. Okay. I've always had trouble with doing this type of binding with a straight stitch because I can't make it look nice on the back, and this always looks nice on the back. So all right, so we're going to zigzag up into this corner very carefully because we're going to leave that pin in so nothing shifts on us. Okay, then I'm going to turn the corner like this, and I'm going to look at my notch on my foot, and I'm going to put it down so I can see, and I'm a little bit off to the side here. So I'm going to put my foot down, raise my needle a little bit, and I'm going to scoot over just a teeny bit so that my needle or my little notch is on the edge of my binding. And then we're going to get everything lined up again, and we're going to zigzag out of the corner. And I'm still struggling a little bit with the corners. You know, the corners take a little practice, and I'm getting better at them. So your corners may have just a little, show just a little on the back, but as you get better at it, it really is, this is a really fast, easy way to do binding. And I think it's strong if you're making binding, you know, if you're doing quilts that people are going to be using, like I use my quilts. And I want the binding to be good and strong so it's not going to come off, you know, so I don't like to hand stitch very well anyway. All right, so we're just zigzagging. The right zig is on the binding and the left zag is off. Okay, so we're going to keep going. I'm putting it right up to the line that I sewed it on with. And I've gotten so I can go pretty fast now. So I'm getting much better at it. It takes a little practice. Just keep practicing it. But these are, especially when you're doing little things like this is so much faster to put binding on instead of having to hand stitch it all down. All right, getting close. So I'm going to kind of pull back with my fingernail just to hold that nice and straight there in the corner. Oops, I better pull this pin out just a little bit and leave that pin in so that you don't lose your beautiful corner. I'm going to go into the corner very carefully with the pin. Okay, I think I need to take one more stitch. There we go. Then we're going to go around the corner. And that one extra stitch made it a little bit too long. So this is what I found. So then I can put my foot down, raise my needle, scoot over a little bit, and put that notch back on the edge of my binding. Put the needle back down. Then get everything lined back up again here. And come out of the corner. There we go. So you can fix it in the corners, and I've slowly developed that little technique because it works pretty well for me, and I get my corners pretty nice now. I still have a little problems occasionally, but they're much better than they were. All right. Okay. I've had a lot of practice doing these. All right, so we're going to go across here to the next side. And again, I do sew a lot faster doing this than I used to. So if you're not able to keep up with, keep up with me, just pause and do your side, and then we'll do the corner here down here. In fact, I may just turn the camera off for a little bit, and I'll show you the last corner. And then I'll finish this up, and then I'll show you the end and the last corner, and then we'll be ready to finish up our little project here. So I'll be back in a moment. I'm going to go around here again, go into the corner, going to kind of put my fingernail here to hold it nice and straight, go down this side, then I'll show you the last corner again so you can see another corner. All right, so I'm about ready to get down to the last corner here, and I'm going to put my fingernail kind of in the corner to line this all up so it's nice and straight. So we're going to zigzag down to the corner here. So remember, right zig on the binding, left zag off the binding. And we're going to go down into the corner very slowly because of that pin. Okay, and then we're going to turn the corner. Now the other thing I did, I don't know if you can see right here, I put a little pin where I started. So when you're zigzagging, you don't want to zigzag over the other zigzags too much because that kind of shows. So I usually put a pin there so I can stop, like right away. I'm going to take that last clip off and pull this out just a little bit. Get everything lined up, and then we're going to, I think I'm going to have to adjust though. Put my foot down, needle up, then I need to adjust over to the over to the right a little bit. There we go. All right. Get my little notch right on the edge of my binding. Okay. And sometimes it wants to not go right away, so I gave it just a little help when you're on that big stiff or the thick stuff sometimes. Okay, so we're going to get everything lined up here. It doesn't happen very often. These machines feed very, very well. So well that I rarely use a walking foot. I mean, you could use a walking foot to do this if you have a different sewing machine. You might need to. I very rarely do because they feed so well. Okay, so I'm just about to my pin, and I don't want to go over more than a stitch or so, and then I'm going to tie off just because I don't want it to show. All right, we're going to tie off. We're going to cut. Oh my gosh, look at there. We're done. Okay, so we got our little mini quilt all bound. Take our pins out here before I stab myself. I'm always stabbing myself with these. They're so sharp. I like sharp pins though. Oh my gosh, look at there. I got a little thread over here. Get that out of there. Oh my gosh, isn't that cute? So look at our little mini quilt. And then on the back, I'm going to take this over to my ironing board now, and I can unpin these. I'm going to take this over to my ironing table, and I'm going to take the paper off of my Heat and Bond Ultra, and then I'm going to go ahead and press it down. And then what I'm going to do is take a needle and thread, just some white thread, and just put a stitch in this corner here and here just to hold the edge down, because the Heat and Bond doesn't like that extra bulk there very well. So I will be right back to show you the finished mini quilt. Okay, so there's our little mini quilt. Oh my gosh, isn't that cute? I really love it. The colors are so vibrant and pretty, and it looks very summery and 4th of July like, doesn't it? So living the sweet life. So thank you so much for joining me for the July Kimberbell Mini Quilt. This was the last part, the assembly. And next month we'll be doing the August, so around the 1st of July, we'll do the August mini quilt. And I think it was the beach theme, so I'm actually looking really forward to doing that one as well. So thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, Sew Along with Jan, please do. That way you get notifications when I have new content for you to watch. So thanks everybody, and have a great day.